It's been a super busy few weeks. I think you're going to be hearing me saying that a lot this year through the summer and fall. I want to talk about two things that have been in the news in the last few days or week or so and get you up to speed. First of all, as you'll remember from last week's update, we discovered through the work of a Good Samaritan in Renton, Washington, a box of undelivered ballots for various elections, both primaries and generals, in the past couple of years. These ballots had never been delivered to their intended recipient, the voters on the King County and voter database, and they got stuck in limbo. And our Good Samaritan found them in a box next to a dumpster outside a strip mall in Renton. Our Good Samaritan had tried to get in touch with King County elections and with the State Secretary of State, some other officials, and had no luck getting through. And so, not knowing what to do, he brought them to me, brought them to us here. We publicized this. We showed that these ballots, and there were a little under 400 of them that were never delivered, were proof that the broken chain of custody in our mail-in voting system here in Washington is a problem. The ballots were not proof of fraud, but they were proof that the broken chain of custody, that means in the process of delivering the ballots either to the voter or the voter returning the ballot to the county election officials, not every step in the delivery is tracked. And there are these places in the process where we don't know who's got control of the ballots. It's very bad. I mean, shoot, you order something from Amazon or you get a package delivered from Federal Express, and you can go on their websites and see every track, every step of the way, and those products being delivered to you. But when it comes to our ballots, there are gaps in the tracking. We need to do a better job of tracking and fix that broken chain of custody over the ballots that people vote. Well, it's been interesting that in the last few days, the story got traction. It's been covered pretty well. It's irrefutable, really. You can't argue against this. It's proof that these ballots didn't get to their intended voters, and it's proof of a broken chain of custody problem. What we did is we checked these ballots, we scanned them, we didn't open them. A couple were already open, sort of jostled open. But we respected the ballots. We took the data from the outside of the envelopes so that we could see who the intended voters were. And all the while, we had contacted the federal authorities, the proper federal authorities. In this case, it's the United States Postal Inspectors Service, part of the U.S. Postal Service. And they were talking with the FBI, trying to figure out who was the best agency to investigate these ballots that had been left outside for anyone to grab. And they have them now. The U.S. Postal Inspectors have the ballots now in their possession, and they are doing an investigation to try to determine where the system went wrong. How, with these gaps in the chain of custody over the ballots, they could end up in a box outside a strip mall in Renton. This is good in the long run for restoring people's trust in our elections here. It illustrates a problem, and what we would like the King County Elections Office and the Secretary of State, Secretary of State, to acknowledge is the problem. We'd like them to say, yeah, you're right. There are gaps in the delivery process. It's an issue. We need to do something to tighten it up, to fix the broken chain of custody. Instead, disappointingly, the State Secretary of State and the King County elections officials are trying to blame us. They're trying to insinuate that we did something wrong and that we fabricated this, or we're pushing conspiracy theories or this kind of, we're doing nothing of the sort. The ballots prove that the broken chain of custody is a problem that needs to be addressed. I'm not surprised that the state secretary of state and the election officials in King County are trying to attack me and insult me. It's okay. That's what I'm here for. But we're going to continue to tell the truth, and we're going to continue to show evidence of the problems in the mail-in voting system here in an effort to fix the problems. Ultimately, what we want in the Washington State Republican Party is people to trust the election system and more people to vote. Our big goal is to increase voter participation, voter turnout. That's how we believe we're going to get more common sense conservatives elected things in Washington. As you know, voter participation overall, it's not just Republicans, Democrats, everyone. Voter participation in general in Washington State has been declining. We want to get voter participation back up. That's a major goal of this year for this organization. And we think shining the light of truth on where the problems lie in our election system is one way to do that. Now, switching gears slightly, we have currently in the court system here in Washington State 2 different lawsuits challenging the unconstitutional state income tax scheme pushed forward by Bob Ferguson and the state Senate Democrat leader Jamie Peterson and a few others of their crew. And there's been some interesting developments there. A number of email documents were unearthed by an investigative journalist that show that Senator Peterson, who was one of the main sponsors of this unconstitutional state income tax scheme, was consulting with lawyers with the state attorney general's office about drafting this unconstitutional tax proposal. And he was particularly seeking the counsel not of Nick Brown, the current state attorney general in Washington, but of one of Nick Brown's lieutenants, a guy by the name of Noah Purcell, whose title is the Solicitor General of the state of Washington. That's not an elected position. That's an appointed position by the state attorney general who is elected. And Purcell has really emerged as being one of the big brains of the progressive left in Washington State. And Senator Jamie Peterson was corresponding with Noah Purcell by email primarily, and basically asking Purcell's advice about drafting Senate Bill 6346. That's the state income tax proposal. And Purcell said to Peterson, hey, I see there's no emergency clause on the bill. This was an early draft version of the bill. You should put an emergency clause on it in order to prevent the people from having the right of referendum on it to overturn it if it passes. So Purcell said outright, said the quiet part out loud, as they say. He said, put an emergency clause on the thing so that the people can't have a referendum and vote against it. That's a smoking gun. I mean, it's not illegal, his advice, but it certainly is shady, and it backs up our argument that the progressive left puts these emergency clauses on just about any bill specifically to prevent the people from their constitutional right of running an initiative to overturn the bill. So this is in black and white, or ones and zeros on a digital email record. And more interesting still, one of the recent appointees to the state Supreme Court here in Washington State, a woman by the name of Colleen Melody, used to work in the state attorney general's office with Noah Purcell, was a colleague, co-worker. And this goes back to the days when the current governor, Mr. Ferguson, was the state attorney general here. Well, Mr. Ferguson, now the governor, recently appointed Colleen Melody, former co-worker of Noah Purcell at the State Attorney General's office, to the state Supreme Court, one of those positions where an unexpected resignation happened. Maybe because the judge who resigned doesn't want to be part of shenanigans that look like they lay ahead. Anyway, Ferguson appoints this Colleen Melody to the wrote the email telling Senator Peterson to add in order to prevent a referendum. Not only was Judge Melody's co-worker for a while, he's a financial contributor to her campaign to hold her state Supreme Court seat. Our state Supreme Court judges have to run, have to be elected or re-elected here in Washington. So Purcell, who wrote the memo saying put an emergency clause on the state income tax to prevent a referendum, is a former co-worker and financial contributor to Justice Colleen Melody's re-election campaign or election campaign. She's never been elected before. She was appointed. And now there's a lawsuit heading on a quick pace to the state Supreme Court challenging the issue of the emergency clause on the state income tax to prevent a referendum vote to overturn the state income tax. Justice Melody is sitting right now on a temporary basis on the state Supreme Court. She needs to recuse herself from the state Supreme Court's review of the lawsuit challenging the emergency clause on the state income tax. Too close. Too many combinations of interest with the fellow who wrote the memo saying to put the thing on to prevent the referendum. The lawsuit seeks to strip the emergency clause off and allow a referendum to overturn the state income tax. So she's too deeply involved and too conflicted, in my opinion, to render a fair judgment on that challenge. Now, under Washington law, a judge can't be forced to recuse himself or herself from hearing a case. The judge, basically, is the only one who can decide to do that. So it's up to Justice Melody whether she decides to recuse herself or not from the case for removing the emergency clause from the state income tax that her buddy who wrote the memo suggested. If she doesn't recuse herself, I believe this calls into question the fairness and the objectivity of the state Supreme Court in considering that case. And if she doesn't recuse herself, I think she throws the whole case into jumbo, and we need to move the case out of the state court system and into the federal court system, where it can get a fairer review. These issues are all interconnected. This is not necessarily anything illegal, but it is decadent. It's the result of too many years of one party dominating Olympia politics, and we, the WGOP, have to put an end to this. This is what we're going to focus on in 2026. All of us together. I need your help out in your counties, out in the field, talking to neighbors, talking to family, talking to coworkers. We need to build a grassroots momentum for real change here in Washington this year. That's it for this week. Until next time, be well.